Hey, 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 it's Dr. Lisa, and you are joining me today on Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. Hi, everybody. If you are live with me on Facebook and Instagram, I really appreciate it. I can see you. Thank you. Today, I want to remind you one quick thing that I cannot read your data from some of your evaluations. That would be your children's or yours. I really do love the fact that a lot of you trust my judgment, and thank you. But the best thing you can do is to go back to the person that actually evaluated you or gave you your diagnosis. That would be your psychologist, psychiatrist, or your for the school psychologist. So keep that in mind. So I don't want you to be upset because I don't answer your questions about your personal evaluations. That's not something I can do. And that's not why I'm here. Okay. And most of you know that I work with children, so I really don't even work with adults unless they're parents. So keep that in mind when you are sending different things to me, and I appreciate it. So I just dump them. I don't read them, and then I respond to you. Okay. If you would like to call in, please do so on Podbean. You can call in and share your experiences. You can ask questions. There are a lot of you telling me that you either had this experience when you guys were younger, little kids, or you actually. Um, Hi, everybody. Thank you for saying hi to me. It's so sweet that it's throwing off my line of thinking. But if you want to join, feel free to do so. Ask me questions. I'm looking at all social media accounts right now, including Podbean. So I'm sorry I sound so nasal. I'm very congested still, believe it or not. So we will work our way through Dr. Lisa's congestion. If you want to give me a call, please do so at 765 205 1959. I will answer your question to the best of my ability. I also like email, so you can always email me. The email address is kidscanseghosts@gmail.com. So I look forward to hearing from you um, by way of other media outlets. So I hope you guys have had a good day. I wonder if you are ready for me to introduce you to a new child. I can't wait to talk about this one. This is blog 13 on my website. Um, my website is my name, LisaLigginschambers.com. So when you get a chance, if you have that blog open, scroll down to May 21st. So this is way back, May 21st of this year when I wrote this blog, all about Child C. So this is blog 13, Child C. I'll describe why I saw Child C. At this point in time, I was only working as a school psychologist. So I was not working clinically with kids. But I have to tell you, once you have that clinical knowledge, it's with you. And so it'll always be with me. And that's actually a blessing. So sometimes, like, for example, there was somebody that I saw today who had 4 different diagnoses from the DSM-5 or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual TR, the 5th edition. So we call that the DSM-5. And there were 4 different diagnoses that I knew for kids and knew what to do with them. So that's when it comes in handy. This one, however, my job was to assess this child for a specific learning disability. And this, I'll give you a couple of details that I did not put in the blog. A lot of you want to know if there are disparities between race and gender, even from parents. And so I'll say to you that this was a female child C, also African American. So, and this child, I believe, was in St. Louis. And so yeah, I'm scrolling through the blog. I'm pretty sure this is St. Louis. And so this was the way that I was testing this child was in a classroom, and it was in a pretty big classroom. So it actually may have been a resource room. um, because it was pretty big. And I want you to imagine the classroom, okay? So you guys have all been in classrooms before. This one had windows. The way that I'm sitting at the desk is how I was sitting with this one. And this child was in front of me and we were testing. So I was facing the windows. So there were in the old, some of the old, very old schools that I worked in St. Louis, they had really large and beautiful floor to ceiling windows. And so this one had, it wasn't just floor to ceiling, but it also had double windows. So really there were four, but there were two together, if that makes sense. And so those windows became a really powerful conversation between this little girl and I. And so this is also an older child. So this one was able to answer all kinds of questions when I started finding out that this was a kid, another nebulous child, or a kid that can see ghosts. So I'll just set you up for the blog. I don't actually test kids when I first meet them. I expose myself to them, meaning, and I said the word expose, so let me operationalize that. I go to their classrooms and I give them high fives in the hallways and I get to know them in the cafeteria. You know, I have relationships with these kids. My philosophy is you can't work with a kid unless you know them. I mean, that would make sense, right? So there hasn't been a time where I just tested a kid in the school, like, hello, I'm Dr. Lisa. Let's go test for a specific learning disability. I don't roll like that with these kids. I am a stranger to them. So this is something that I did to this child as well. And so we actually had a really good rapport established by the time I tested her. So what kind of test did I give? Well, the funny one is the IQ test. So that's where I'm going to start. So most of you know what an intelligence test or IQ test is. And so one of the ways that we make kids eligible for a specific learning disability, and this was in another state, we use an IQ test, and we don't do that all the time in Illinois, but this was in Missouri. And so now I want you to imagine me giving an IQ test and this kid was giggling. Just as if something was tickling her. And you know, and before I would even think that a kid could see ghosts, I am a behaviorist by trade. So I observe any behavior and all behavior. And so when there was just this kind of giggle, almost as if this little girl was being tickled, I kind of, you know, questioned, hey, what's going on? Because that was a little strange to me. And you just had to be there to see it. You ever been around someone who you can tell they have a secret, but they won't tell you? And that's how she was behaving. It's kind of like if I would have just kind of touched her little cheek like this, she would have had diarrhea of the mouth about being able to see ghosts. But I don't do that, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. So one of the things that she would also do is she would keep, there's a window to my left. So if you can kind of see a little bit of it in the videos, she would constantly look out the window like this, you know, and just stare out at the window. So remember when I talked about child A looking out the window and then child B. So understand while this was happening, these different behaviors with this little one, it made me start thinking about some of my past experiences with other children. So yes, we all look out the window, but this is different. This was a girl of almost as tall as I am. Not that I'm not. Well, yes, I'm 6 feet tall. Okay, that's a lie. I'm like 5'4". But she was about my height, and she's just kind of looking out of the window and laughing as if she could hear something, and staring out of the window as if something was talking to her. Now, Did I think psychotic? No. No, that's not my first line of thinking when I work with kids. What I first thought about was the angel in the tree. Remember that blog? The angel in the tree. Because I had already had an experience, remember, with a nebulous child who actually, all of them talked about the angel in the tree, but there was two in particular before child C who told me that they talked to the angel in the tree. So I kind of thought that that's what this little girl was doing. And so there was another behavior that I noticed. So in between each intelligence subtest, so if I gave them a test where we played with blocks, every time I would, and so that was fine. That was fine. Those are called nonverbal tests. So everything that you do without your mouth or your words. So puzzles, shapes, whatever the case, putting blocks together, those were okay. But when it came down to any verbal answers, there was a long hesitation in between each answer. And it looked as if she was listening to something, and then she would kind of go, and then she would tell the answer. Now, from other blogs, I want you to recall that this was something that happened before to me with another kid. The little jokester, Angel, in the tree was telling some of the kids the answer. So understand, based upon my experiences, I started having some hypotheses that something was talking to this girl. And also, she had a hard time paying attention. So, one of the reasons I brought up the window, well, a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is because she would constantly go up to the window. She would go to the window and then she would talk about what was outside, and then she would come back. And I was kind of like, whoa, what's happening here? And so that was just different for me. And so I started to think that this was a nebulous child. This child had a lot of symptoms. Now, did I ask her if she could see ghosts? No, because remember I mentioned to you that that's not a question that I just come out and ask people. Typically, people will tell me, and that's true to this day. A lot of people are now, because I started the blog and the podcast, there are a lot of people. Somebody just sent me a note wanting some answers right before this blog. And also, just as a sidebar, I have a Quora page, and it surpassed my expectations, including the page that I have connected to Quora, which is what? Kids Can See Ghosts, Can You? There are 40,000 plus comments and views to those pages. So there are some people who are submitting their experiences on that page, and I am releasing them to the public. So you can read those. They're pretty darn interesting. And so given all of these, observations of her behavior, I started to think, I bet I have another nebulous kid on my hands. And so I didn't ask, but there were just a lot of things. So with teenagers, I can be a bit more blunt. With older kids, I would say maybe fourth grade on up. But eighth grade, they believe that they're grown anyway. So you can kind of ask them things. So one of the things that I was asking her was, what are you giggling for? Or who are you giggling with? I would ask her why she kept going up to the window. So let's stop there. She told me. She told me. I didn't have to pull, pry, kick, scream, demand. I didn't have to ask her more than once. She said, I giggle because there's a spirit in the tree. That's what she told me. What was different about this child is that she really wanted to tell me about it. And she's older. A lot of the older kids would be more, they had to really trust me to tell me these things, because remember, they've told people and they were ridiculed and, called crazy. So they had that block sometimes, but this one didn't. And I'll tell you why later. But she said it. She said she was giggling because um, there's a spirit in the room telling her the answers to the test, but there's also a spirit out in the tree. So then, if I hear kids say that there are spirits in the room, you already know what I do. And you also know that I always carry a Bible because why? Mm-hmm. Dr. Lisa tests spirits. I do because I want to make sure that they are, you know, God's angels that are around us in the room. And more times than not, they have not been. They've been dark angels. The difference with this kid, and I don't even think I put this in the blog at all, is that she was very biblically grounded. And here's what was so interesting about her as well. She was biblically grounded based upon what she could see. So she knew that she would see God's angels, and she would tell me, that's a dark angel, and this is how you get rid of it. And this is how you teach your kids that come under your care how to deal with it. And this is why I'm not afraid of it, because I don't have to deal with it. This was a really strong little girl. And she always would say that she believed in God based upon what she could see that other people can't see. Now, I have to admit, that was a little different for me. Because I wasn't used to a kid talking to me that directly about God and dark angels or demons and what have you. And this kid can talk about it till she was blue in the face. The other reason it was a little different is because she wasn't afraid of dark angels. She said she didn't have to be afraid. I remember that because I'm going to tell you, I asked her what she was watching outside of that window, because remember, she kept getting up and she kept going outside the window. Well, she said she was watching the angels outside of the tree. And so, I'm sorry, not the angel in the tree. She was watching the angels on the ground. So picture this. She and I are in the window, and she holds my hand to the window. Because I asked her, what are you looking at outside? Because what she was doing was she kept looking down. We were like on the upper floor, so maybe like a fourth floor. We were up high enough for it to be a fourth floor. And she kept going to the window, and the window was closed. Keep that in mind. And she kept looking down at the ground. So when she would get up, she would look kind of like in the tree. There was a tree over to the right. And then she would look down. And so, I asked her, well, what are you looking at other than the angel in the tree? So obviously all testing was paused at that point. And I don't mind. I go off of what the kids need, not what I need to do or what I need to get done. It's all about them. And so she said, I'm watching the angels outside of the window on the ground with the kids. And so I said, angels outside. Now, remember I talked to you guys about the little girl who said the angels were guarding the doors because they were guarding the kids that we're working with? This one told me that there were angels outside. While the kids were playing on the ground at recess, the kids were outside. As they played outside for recess, their angels were, around. Yep, I got some watermelon wine. Hello. Um, and so I asked her, I said, why are they outside? And then she said, they're guarding the kids, protecting the kids. And I said, well, how do you know that they're angels? And she said, because I know they're God's angels. And I said, well, not all white angels are God's angels. Let's test them. God is my witness when I tell you this. Remember, I can't see this stuff. So I'm going off of what the kids and parents tell me. And I asked the little girl to tell them that if they are God's angels, to come and touch my Bible, etc., etc. And she actually said they came into the room and they were touching the Bible. And she said, Dr. Lisa, I'm telling you that these are God's angels and they're sent to guard the kids outside. Now, mind you, it's a bunch of, abandoned buildings across the street. Just the entire neighborhood was just dilapidated. And you had these little babies just kind of playing outside, just to give you a visual. So I'm looking and I'm like, okay, they are being heavily guarded. And she said, yes. So here's the funny part. And I don't think I wrote this in the blog. I'm kind of fussing. Like, are you sure these are God's angels? And how do we know? And I can't see. And yes, they correspond with the Bible and they touch the Bible and they're not afraid of it. And that was important to me because when I worked with child B, dark angels, if you brought the Bible out, they would scatter. They hated the Bible. And I know that to be true biblically. So when this kid said to me that they actually came in, they're touching the Bible. I remember doing that with child B's mother too, and she was giggling, telling me they're touching the Bible, it's okay. So that's what this little girl was saying. But she said because they were guarding the children, they had to go back outside. And so I said, well, okay. I was just really skeptical, And she starts giggling. And I said, well, what's so funny? She said, you see that little kid playing right there? I said, yeah, it was like one right in the middle. She said, okay, there's an angel sitting on the bench looking at you. And I said, why? And she started giggling. She said, because he said, stop being so mean to them. And I'll never forget that. And I said, I'm not mean. I don't have a mean bone in my body. But you are going to let me know if you're God's angels or not. And she was the one that told me that it was fine. So then the conversation shifted and this little girl got really emotional over me. I never had that happen before with a client, but she was very biblically grounded. Remember that. And so in the blog, I write about how when we were at the window, she started pointing to what she said were my angels. Now, you guys have heard me say this before. So all of the kids, for some reason, like to tell me what was around me. Somebody said Dr. Lisa's bullying angels. A little bit. And so she said, can you see the angels on the ground? My angels. And I said, no. And she said, they can see you and they're guarding you. So there's one in the tree. There's one in the room. There was one looking at me from one of the houses across the street, things like that. So we kind of stopped testing for I don't even remember if we finished testing that day because we just really, really talked about, the kind of visions that she saw. And so I asked her, well, I have a lot. And I started telling her, I'm pretty familiar with working with kids that can see ghosts. But the one thing that you guys all have in common is telling me about my angels. And I don't ask them. They tell me because I guess when we're sitting there, if I put it in real time right now, if they're sitting there and they can see my angels, they're probably just like, it's just one right there. It's one right there. They're all around you. My goodness. But they all knew after I would tell them that I couldn't see you. So that's what she did. She said, there's one behind you. There's one outside in the tree. There's one by the door. That's what I forgot, which was good, honey, because this was in the heart of St. Louis, and they did not let me walk outside by myself. And that's not to say anything negative about St. Louis, but most major cities have a depressed part of the, a depressed area, and this was one of them. And so she was telling me that I had a lot of angels around me. Good to me. And so the other reason that I never forgot this child is because when she became really emotional, she wanted to talk about my family. Yep. So this is the pivotal point. So Child B's family told me a couple things about my family, but I don't think that I told all of you, because that's a part that I'm going to save for when I finish up this book. I will tell you a part of what this child said to me was about my son. And I will never forget this for the rest of my life. I'm thinking, if you can't see me, I don't think my son was 1 year old. He was sitting up in the picture, so he must have been. He was definitely over 6 months. He may have been about 10 months old when I met this little one, and so she wanted to see a picture of my son, and I do not show pictures of my kids. People who have worked with me know to this day I don't show anybody my kids. I rarely show my coworkers my kids. They know I have them, but all three of them are off limits. And you have to, if you are in the field of social services, you have to guard yourself like that. You are not working with your friends. Do not make your clients your friends. Don't have sex with your clients. All that stuff is unethical. Don't do it. Some of it's unethical and also illegal. Keep that in mind. And I've always worked with, a really tough population of kids who can be manipulative. So you don't tell them your private business. But for some reason, I didn't even tell her I had a son. She knew and she wanted to see my son. She said my angel was telling her about my son. And so, oh gosh, I still have that picture. I should show you guys the picture because she held that picture and she cried. And I was stunned. Imagine if you have clients and then you do feel as if you can trust them and you show your picture like that and they just start to cry. You kind of like, what did I do? Or why are you crying? Right? And she said, Dr. Lisa, look, I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. And I said, my baby, yeah, what am I looking at? And then she said, look at all the lights around him. She said, you can't see that? And I said, no. And then she said, he's surrounded by angels. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. She said, huh, you don't see that? And I said, no. And then I said, yeah, okay, the sun is shining from the outside French doors. And then she said, that's what we had. We had French doors. And so there were French doors and a sofa on the wall. And so my baby was sitting like on the carpet. And to me, it looked like the sunlight was reflecting off of him onto him from the window. And she said, no, those are angels. She said, I'm going to point them out to you. Excuse me. And I said, okay. And then she said, he's heavily guarded like you are. She said, you have no idea how this baby is going to be a blessing to you. Child B's mother alluded to that as well. But Child B's mother talked more about my oldest child as opposed to my son. And so the one thing that she said about my son, the reason she said that baby will be a blessing to you, he is your angel. She said, he is your angel. He was born to guard you. He will be a blessing to you. She said, he will do many things in his life to help you and other people. He will protect you. So I'm looking at all of you like, are you looking at me? Because I'm looking at you. Because that was, about 9 years ago. It is insane, honey. Let me tell you. And then you're right. And then she said, what Child B said to me, that I am all of the other kids' angels that I work with. She said, you are their angel. So every kid that you work with, it's kind of like we find you because we've had you before and you are our angel in heaven. And I'm like, Lord, this is too deep for me. And then she said, so your son, is yours. He is your angel. So, I mean, if you want to talk about my little boy, okay, so let's just talk about the other ones. I said, what about my other kids? She said, you are your daughter's angel. I was like, well, you know, girls turn 16. No, I didn't say that, but it's true. And she told me to watch the oldest one because the oldest one is also going to help a lot of people. I think that's true of her, and she just doesn't receive it yet, but that's true. And then the middle one is very creative. The middle one is very creative, and that is true. If some of you have followed me on Facebook, there were times that I used to post my middle daughter all the time, and she is my dancer, my little singer, and now she's playing a clarinet like me. So obviously, you know, a decade ago, I didn't know this was going to happen, but Child C is the one who told me, you know, your middle one is the creative one, you know, very creative. So yeah, I never forgot that at all. And let me sidebar for a second. Child B also talked to me about being the angel to other kids. And I don't know if I told you guys this about Child B. So I'm going to repeat it. And if I told you this before, you know, chalk it up to age and memory, but not the fact that I'm just trying to be repetitive and get on your nerves. Um, Child B, don't get creeped out. Don't get creeped out. Okay. Child B saw me in death. Did I tell you all that? Hey, Rocky. Did I tell you guys that? Hi, Amy. If I didn't, I'll tell you. Child B was the one that saw me in death. So Child B had a dream about me. And Child B said that I was up on a hill. She saw my spirit. She didn't see how I died, but she saw my spirit. And she said that I was like up on a hill. And she said, Child B actually cried when she told me. I wonder if she remembers this. Hey everybody saying hi to me. Hi guys, you guys know I have so much love for you for listening. I was standing on top of a hill and I was looking down. You got to picture it. I was looking down the hill, and Child B said down the hill a was a bunch of little kid spirits, and she said, and I cried in the dream, and I'm crying now. This was Child B, not C. And Child B said to me, those were all the kids, she said, that you helped, including me. She said my spirit was there, and I'm just blown away. I'm like, oh my God. And she said, and you will do this, you know, again and again and again. So the kids that you encounter are kids that you worked with before. And I said, before where? And she said, this is their opinion now and the things that they know. This is not something that I know or even, you know, can see. But they say you've been here before. You have had a couple of lives. So these kids that you encounter are actually kids that you've worked with for a very long time. And so in death, she saw my spirit and she said, those are the kids that you worked with, including me. And that was Child B. So going back to Child C alluded to the same thing. Now I want you to remember that these kids do not know one another. Okay? They do not know one another. They are not related. They are, I'm going to have to turn off the light real quick, okay? They are not related. Everything is confidential. I can never, ever reveal, confidential. You can talk about case studies, but you can't talk about confidential information. So from kid to kid, they don't know me. They don't know one another. So when I'm getting all this information, it's at different times from different kids in different locations. So here you have Child B, I saw at a mental health center, and Child C was in a school. So two very different locations telling me the same thing. So Child B said it, now Child C said it. So I'm hoping that you guys can see how I became so fascinated, excuse me, with these kids, because this was information that kept coming to me. So Child B, I'm sorry, child C. We are on child C. We were only testing. There was no therapy or any of that. So when these things were told to me, I knew where, when I was given an IQ test, where these answers were coming from. And child C said they were coming from the angel in the tree. So this angel was telling this kid all kinds of answers to the IQ test. So I finally told child C that it was up to her to answer the questions on her own and that the angel had to stop. And that's what happened. And I asked her, okay, when he stopped, where did he go? What do you all think she said? He went to heaven. He went to heaven. And so, hey guys, I see you guys on Podbean. And so I said, heaven. And she said, yeah, he went back to heaven. Yep. Yep. I couldn't argue with her. So we talked for a long time. So sometimes it's really good. I felt like, and there was a high schooler that I have to talk about in the blog at some point too, a couple of high schoolers who had disability. So it's always good to me to get these. I look back and say, you know what? It was really good for me to work with the older kids because the older kids gave me a lot of other information, that I didn't get from the little kids. So the difference is the little kids at times were more fascinated with their ability, right? Ooh, 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 kind of like a little kid, in a candy store. Ooh, ooh, now later's all that's whatever the kids eat now. Well, the older kids will go, yeah, I just want some potato chips, right? So that's what these older kids would do. When they would finally start to tell me, well, yeah, I can see, excuse me, I can see, ghosts. And then it was kind of like, whoa, okay. Now there were some kids, obviously, who did not. There were some kids who just did not fare well with their ability. Most of them were okay. When I say when they did not, it's because they would typically listen to what they call dark angels. Remember, I talk about dark angels. They would talk about dark angels and kind of follow what these dark angels would tell them to do. The kids that fared a bit better were the kids like her, who already learned what to do and how to do, how to control their particular gift. So, you know, it was definitely an eye opener for her. Now, let me tell you what happened with my son. I don't know. This obviously he was born before I met Child C. But sometimes when I encounter these kids, it makes me think back to some of the experiences that I had in my own life with my own kids. And so when my son was born, I had crazy anxiety in the hospital. Now there are a lot of women who say, I love all my kids, and we all love our kids, and we all love our kids equally. At least we're supposed to. A lot of women would say, "Oh, wait till you have that boy. When you have that boy," and I remember I would rub my belly and I would kind of go, "There will be no difference in my kids because I love all my kids equally, right?" And I do. And my daughter listens to me. I do, honey. I love all of you equally. Something happened to me when I had that little boy, and I don't know what it is, but something happened to me, and I could not put him down. From the time he was born and cleaned off, probably to this day, I only put him down because he told me he's a big boy, and he is, even if I don't want to admit it. When I was in that hospital room, though, I just felt the need to protect him, and I don't know why. I just would not even sleep after I had him. And to me, that's just some kind of, anxiety when I think back, if I had to say psychologically. But at the same time, here's what happened with child C. Years later, when I met this girl, about a year later, I asked her. There was a chair in the hospital, and I kept looking at that chair, and it just felt creepy to me. It just felt creepy to me. And so I wouldn't put him down because for some reason in that hospital, I just felt creeped out. And so later on, when I met Child C, I asked her, and I don't even know if I wrote this in the blog or not. I said, what was happening, in the hospital? Why did I feel that way? And she said, because you had to guard him. She said, you don't understand how special he is. He's born to guard you, but you guarded him because you did sense something. And she said there was something in the room with you. Now, I didn't mention the chair to her, and she told me it was the chair. God is my witness. She told me it was the chair, and I knew it, and I felt it when I was in the room. One of these days, I'm going to write a blog about my experiences like that, where I've had some, other than these nebulous kids, where I've had some, experience with the paranormal. Because remember, I talked about one with my own personal experiences. I talked about one, and that was with the toys. Remember, I talked about the toys on one of my jobs where I walked in the room and all the toys lit up, but the building was haunted anyway. So stuff like that. And all I know is when he was born, I kept him in my arms. And it was to the point where the nurses had to pry him away. I just felt like there was something in the room. And when I met Child C told me, yes, there was something in the room. So this was a really important child within, my life. And I'll tell you the reason that this child was important is because there were a lot of things that I'm actually going to write about, like a whole big chapter about Child C, because there were some things that Child C even taught me about how to interact with kids who were very similar to her. So it was a big moment for me, and I had the opportunity to thank this kid because this is an older child. So I went and I'm sorry, I gotta block somebody on my page real quick who's saying some nasty stuff. Don't do that. I will talk about you on air. So I just blocked them. If you're on Podbean and you're listening, just ignore that person. I just blocked that person. Um, there's a lot that I can say about Child C because Child C taught me a whole lot, about kids, because this was a girl that I was able to um, actually say goodbye to because I wound up leaving that place, and I had to, say goodbye. So I finally finished testing. This is not in the blog. I finally finished testing Child C. And one of the things that I did make this kid eligible for was a learning disability. Now, this was actually interesting too, because this kid was fully aware of the challenges academically and would tell me, and I really appreciate that, about kids who can do that. But the other thing was, this one didn't have any mental health impairments that, were getting in the way of her education. So here you have some people want to understand the difference between mental illness and kids that actually can see ghosts. Sometimes those kids they're human. They are impacted by mental illness. But what I would do is try to separate the two to try to deal with mental health and also, their ability to see ghosts. And sometimes their ability would do what? Cause symptoms of mental illness. Remember, I said I felt anxious in the hospital? It's not because I could see ghosts or anything like that, but I knew something was in the room and I was getting worked up because I had a newborn baby, right? And so with this girl, she wasn't like that. She could see a dark angel and kind of say, get the hell out of here, right? She was a really strong girl. And so she did not allow herself to be consumed with anxiety or sadness because she was really good at controlling it. A lot of the kids that would come to me initially, when I did find out, they were able to see ghosts, they were having symptoms of mental health, because remember, that's why their parents would bring them to me. They did have symptoms of mental health. This one did not. She just had an IEP. And so the more that I talked to her, it helped me to understand the difference even deeper between symptoms of mental health and then also, um, you know, uh, special education. And then there was a third variable for her, um, special education, mental illness, and then the difference between the two and how to detect when the kids were lying, which we have not talked about. Yes, some of them did lie about it. And I'll just tell you real quick, one quick way that I knew if the kids were telling me the truth or not is by what they would see around me. So I started using myself over time to determine if these kids were lying or not to me, because remember, I had a pattern for a couple of years of what the kids would tell me was what was around me. So I could easily, if they said, for example, there was a dark angel behind me, I go, they're lying. And you know how I know they're lying? Because I kept a Bible and I prayed, and I had to. Over time, I became a lot more centered on God, because if you work with these kind of kids, it doesn't matter if you don't want to or if you don't believe in God or not. It doesn't matter. If they can do this, they are seeing things that you can't see, and you better protect yourself. Better protect yourself if you're going to work with these kids. And one way to protect yourself is to make sure you become grounded biblically, not perfect, but grounded biblically, because these kids do tell you dark angels. I got a whole 2 or 3 blogs about dark angels. They do tell you about these things. I have a lot of stories about dark angels. So somebody was saying on Instagram about some paranormal situations that happen in life since childhood. I'm so glad you said that. And if you ever want to get on, you know, on Podbean with me and talk about your experiences, you absolutely can. And I actually know this person personally. So thank you for sharing that, because a lot of people need to understand there are a lot of people who can see ghosts, period. Whether you believe in it or not, I do. There are a lot of people who can do this. And so every time I do this podcast or I write my blogs, I am telling you the truth, and I try to set you up for each podcast so that I try to set you up so that in each blog you understand. So one of the reasons I was talking about kindness last week is because Child C was just a kind little one, just kind and thoughtful, and was very spiritual and emotional. Just a kind little kid. And you come across really kind kids, at least I do all the time. This one, it seemed like she was feeling it seemed like she was feeling God's love. She was so happy. She was so happy. Happy to tell me all about it. So there are people out there who are even live. Like if you get on my Instagram page, I'm open on 2 Instagram pages, my personal page, and that one is locked, but also on my public page, Kids Can See Ghosts. Can you? That's the handle. And you can see people just commenting sometimes about, their own experiences with seeing ghosts. So keep that coming. I appreciate that. Let me know. If you do want to come on air and talk about it, just jump on. I'll let you on. I'm sitting in front of it and can click a button and you're on. So it's so good to talk to you guys. We are next week. Let's see. I cut Child C off because there's so much to talk about with Child C. But what we're going to do is go, oh, definitely have to join me next week. If you look at the blog 14, this is a really, really strong one. Blog 14 is when religion and spirituality collide. So make sure you join me next week because that's actually a really strong topic. And that was something that I talked about over and over again. Even sometimes when I teach graduate students or undergrads, I bring this up because if you're going to deal with a lot of different people, you also have to deal with the things that they believe in or that they don't. Okay? So I will see you guys next week. Make sure you read blog 14 and come prepared and also to talk to me about your experiences. All right? I'll see you guys next week. Bye. Thanks for joining me, guys. I appreciate it. Kim, you're so welcome. It's such a fun topic. And I really enjoyed doing it. I'm so glad I'm doing it. Have a good night, okay? Bye-bye.